So, Jim, I believe your training had more or less come to an end then, and your first deployment or phase of operational duties was up at Vic Falls, an old stomping ground of mine. Can you tell us
Yes.
about that?
An area you know very well.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Okay, so now Rhodesia has become Zimbabwe Rhodesia.
Yeah.
Okay, and there was the integration of Fumarevanu, the Spear of the People, which was Muzorewa's army, into the security forces, and they were operating up in, and I can't remember which TTL it was. I'm sorry, but they were operating in this TTL in the Vic Falls area, and they've been getting into a lot of contacts with ZAPU. I guess it would have been coming in from Zambia. So our first deployment, if you like, was go as pseudo Fumarevanu into the area and try and figure out what was going on. And really to try and attract fire, to try and engage these guys as Fumarevanu. So it might have been 16 of us, led by a very large Matabele NCO, and we kitted up as Fumarevanu, and we were told, do not act like you're in the army, act sloppy. Now, this is basically everything you've been taught is now being told you got to act like Fumarevanu. So, well, that was great because you could smoke and you could kind of slouch around a little bit and whatever. So we blackened up and off we went. It was pretty hot. I think the horseflies or the tsetse flies or whatever had a field day. Your camo cream was always running off because of sweat. And that camo cream, I'm telling you, attracted those flies. There was something in there that attracted them. Anyway, we traipsed around for a couple of weeks, but I think it was obvious that we were not Fumarevanu and that the insurgents didn't fall for the bait on that one. But one thing we did...
It was very, very hard to get them up in that area, Jim. They were just very shrewd, you know.
Yeah, they were. And, you know, we learned firsthand the Mujiba system.
Yeah.
You know, we captured a couple of these Mujibas, and they were just kids. They were like 14 years old, something like that. Okay, so tell us where the comrades are. Just over there. There was never any distance, like 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers away. It was just over there. And you'd traipse and you'd traipse and you'd traipse, and then you'd see another Mujiba running. And, you know, it was the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that op didn't really work out. But it was, you know, it was our first time going from training to operations, and we spent a couple more weeks up there.
It was a very dispiriting area to operate in because you worked your backside off and you got hardly any results. I can testify to that. It was horrible.
Yep, but you knew they were there.
Yeah.
You know, in villages we'd go to, there'd be signs, or there'd be AK ammo stored in the thatch huts of the villagers. So yeah, it was a bit, you know, we were a bit despondent. But anyway, it was our first operation. We came back to Nkoma Barracks. Colonel Reed Daly presented us with our Selous Scouts wings, you know, the brown numbered wings.
Very nice.
And I remember as he came up to me, he said, "Junior." I mean, he called everybody Junior. Junior. You know, you're kind of petrified. What's going on here? I want you to go to the quartermaster store. Yes, sir. and get some muscles. Yes, sir. And everyone's shivering, you know. Anyway, so that, no, sorry. Let me take it back. When he gave us our belt and berets, he said, Junior, you go to the quartermaster store, get some muscles. When he presented us with our wings a couple of months later, Junior, I thought I told you to go to the quartermaster store. That brought out a lot more laughter. Yeah. But maybe I can say something about Lieutenant Colonel Ron Reed Daly. He was a man's man. We would do anything for him, and that wasn't just us. It was all the way through the regiment. And I remember even back to training troop on our first 6 weeks, we'd do these runs, and he'd be standing there on top of one of the guard towers watching us. He came along on many of the operations we did later, not going into the bush, but guiding the operation. He really was a true soldier, and I was fortunate enough later on in life to get to know him much better. He came and stayed with us in the UK a couple of times. I went to visit him in Simonstown a number of times, and he was just one of the most genuine people I've ever met, and somebody. I mean, it was the same with all of our officers. I mean, these were people that you respected. These were people that you would do anything for. One interesting thing back to our deployments was, and you know this as well, on most of our deployments into Zambia, which is where we concentrated on, because later we were moved to FAF2 at Kariba, and we did a number of externals there. But one of the things that and it also seems to amaze our American counterparts, is that once we were on the ground, the NCO was in charge. It was normally they made the on the ground decisions, whereas in other larger armies, things have to be relayed up to the top before they can move. And I was actually reading something, or maybe it was in a podcast, that Delta Force here in the US, part of the army, are one of the few regiments or units left that make decisions on the ground, or decisions are made on the ground by their NCOs. And it was incredible, because when you're on the ground, your NCO could be an AS. We normally, well, it varied when we went external. It would either be, if it was an ambush, it would be maybe 12 men. If it was a smaller operation, a reconnaissance operation, or maybe a mine-laying operation, it would be 4 men. And, never once did we, or certainly I, never felt any distrust for the AS NCOs that were out there with us. And you know what it's like. If there's only 4 of you, you can't do guard duty as you would normally. So you scatter and you sleep under whatever foliage or you can find. It's not like regular guard duty. So anyway, let me just check my.
Did you ever feel threatened by working with turned tours? Did they?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. And assault group, for some reason, actually became, or part of assault group, worked a lot with the Selous Scouts recce team in supporting roles, follow-up roles, fire force roles. And in the recce team, you had guys like Captain Devil, Andy Samuels, and a good friend of mine that I was at school with, I'll just call Sergeant Ian. And then you had a number of these turned tours. And although we were never really in the pseudo role, we would work with these guys if there was a direct intervention that was needed. And long way to answer your question. No, never. I mean, not the, these guys were just the same as us. You know, we'd have braais at night. They'd wear shorts and felt skins, which is rare for an AS.
What made them actually become so loyal? One minute they're going to kill you, the next minute. What was it in their psyche, or did they suddenly realize they'd been making a mistake, or they enjoyed what you guys were doing? What do you think it was that sold them?
Well, whenever there was a capture, they were turned over immediately to special branch under Mac McGuinness and Winston Hart and other men like that. And they were well treated. If they were injured, they were patched up in one of our forts and the hospital facilities that were there. They were well fed, and they weren't expecting this. They were expecting to be shot on sight or worse. And you know, the thing is, you need to turn these guys pretty quickly. And they were really given a choice. Okay, you can go on trial for being a terrorist, where you'll probably be hanged, or you can work with us. We'll upload your family from wherever they are into Andre Rabi barracks to the accommodation there, where there's schools, hospitals. It really, to me, it wasn't much of a choice. But the thing is, they stayed loyal, and even after the war, the majority of them joined the Zimbabwe National Army, and many of them got promotions to officer level. Many were decorated for their roles in Intumbani and others. And by the way, that was a fantastic podcast you made of the history of Intumbani, because it's not a well-known operation. Thank you for doing that. And then, I mean, Andy Samuels was a great soldier, ex-RLI, Bronze Cross, and we worked with him, Sergeant Ian, Butch Atkins, Willie Devine, you know, guys like that, very, very accomplished soldiers, and they would plan our externals along with the officers of the assault group. So we would get some of the experience that those reconnaissance guys were getting, and really, really an amazing part of the regiment, and not really a troop within the regiment that you hear much about, other than the great exploits of Chris Schulenberg and Tim Callow and Stephen Mpofu and people like that. So yeah, it was very interesting for us. We had the basics pretty much down to a fine art. In other words, if you've got a deployment into Zambia, you don't drop the troops on the target. You know, you walk in. It could be 10, 15 kilometers that you have to walk in. You sleep during the day. We hide up during the day. You walk at night. And you know, in previous years, the U.S. military has had some horrendous casualties by dropping their men on target, whether it's Takaga or whether it's Mogadishu. You know, they just haven't got it yet. But anyway, that was pretty hard, because you're walking in at night. You've got no night vision goggles. You're wearing a pack that could be 80 pounds, because you're carrying water, you're carrying batteries, you're carrying ammunition. I mean, those TR-48 batteries, I think for every 5 we carried, one would work. It was, but anyway, it is what it is. And you know, you're walking.
They were as heavy as a bag of cement, weren't they? Damn horrible things. Yeah.
They were, and really the only use for them, if they did work, was to climb up a tree with an aerial and listen to LM radio or Radio Faith.
The cricket score.
That would be the only reason you could give for lugging those things around. But it was, it was pretty heavy going. I'm not the biggest guy in town, and you had this pack. We walked in single file formation. Every hour we'd rest. But the problem was, if you sat down with your pack on against a tree, it was very, very hard to get up again. And I'll be honest, my biggest fear was getting separated from the other guys, which can easily happen. You doze off and you kind of wake up. Nobody's really looking to make sure you're there because you're expected to be there. And that was, I wasn't scared of getting shot. I was scared of getting separated from the rest of the guys. Just one point. One of the guys that I was at school with in the same class, a guy called Rob Francis, he always wanted to join the RLI, which he did, and he passed all his courses. He was deployed, and he took a round through the head the first minute he was actually in the bush, and he was such a nice kid. He was very soft, very unassuming. He was more gymnastics rather than rugby. And you look back and you think, what a loss.
Terrible loss.
Let me just check my notes again. So after that, we operated out of Milabisi, Decca. We operated out of Kanyemba, where we would be flown into Kanyemba and then chop it across into Zambia. But that I got a chance to see the Mapata Gorge, which is incredible. The wildlife there. We based up in some of the old hunting camps. I don't know if they're GHI, whatever they were, which were basically burnt out, but they were still structures. They were still concrete structures. And we based up there, and then we'd go external to Zambia. And I remember I had a very strange incident. In Zambia, we were walking around, kind of doing what the SAS called jitter patrols. You're coming across Zodiac boats, you're coming across ammunition, food. Yeah, because at this time of the war, we were really trying to nail them in their own country rather than letting them come across the border. And we walked into an area. First of all, you know that smell of the potato plant. They call it the potato plant. It's almost a musty kind of smell you get in the Zambezi. Anyway, we walked into this area, and we were moving. We'd been dropped off by chopper, and we were moving to a rest up place for the night. And it was just as it was getting dusk, and smell all this potato. I think there were maybe 8 of us, maybe a few more. Anyway, we walked into this resting place, and we came across these trees. You know what? I don't know the name for it, but it's called vegetable ivory.
Oh yes.
Those heavy pods that you can carve, and it looks very much like ivory. In fact, I think they sell that in curio shops now up at Vic Falls.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going through this kind of area, and we come to this clearing, and there were all these elephant bones. There were even some tusks in place, and the age of these elephants could have been from 100 years to really recent, because one carcass the vultures had eaten and kind of left. So let's say there were the bones and tusks of elephants in this area. You had this vegetable ivory around you, and if anyone says that an elephant graveyard doesn't exist, I will challenge them on that. And I've got a wonderful poem on my wall that was given to me by a guy, a fellow soldier who's on my same selection. He was an Australian called Guy Percival. Wonderful guy, very quiet, but a great soldier. And he joined national parks afterwards before he went back to Australia. It's called "The Place Where the Elephants Die." I don't know if you've ever read that poem.
I haven't, but I believe that these graveyards are real. I mean, the fact that elephant hide was still relatively new, sitting on top of tusks that were 80 years or 100 years old, that's not human activity. That's where they've congregated to die.
Exactly. And we discussed it amongst ourselves. We whispered it amongst ourselves. And some guys thought it might have been poachers, but in the end, we agreed this is an elephant graveyard, and it still gives me shivers thinking about it. And I think Wally Inch was with us, Sergeant Wally Inch, who was a wonderful character. In fact, there's a photograph of him coming out of a chopper walking back. He was the last man out of Zambia. Great guy. And we said, okay, well, when the war's over, we're going to come back. This ivory, we're going to be millionaires, and blah blah blah. The usual thoughts that you have. I mean, did you see anything like that in your experiences, Tony? Because you spend a great deal of time
Never.
in the bush.
I saw plenty of living elephants and plenty of other animals, but never ever came across any evidence of that. So, I've heard it from old hunters. We had an old major that was based at Wankie at the base there, Fourndip Base Camp, and he used to sit and tell us stories. I mean, he was about 85 years old then. Stories of hunting out animals so that they could put farmers in the area. They had to clear the tsetse fly, and he used to tell me of the vast herds of elephant. But I don't think he even mentioned finding a graveyard. So I believe they exist, but what you found was possibly something along those lines. Yeah.
Yes, and it was actually, we walked into that area along an elephant trail. And it was, I would say it was maybe a kilometer from the Zambezi. But anyway, I'll send you that poem. It's a great poem. And Wally Inch was certainly a character. He was pretty gung ho, and we came across a group over in Zambia, and Wally decided he was going to capture one of them rather than take them out. And he was one of these guys where if we did a reconnaissance, an OP, and found a base camp, he'd want to go with 4 guys to take it out. He had to be calmed down, let's say. But what a great soldier and a great person. Another guy was an older TA guy called Des Sinclair, and everybody will remember Buffalo Bill Des, and he was pretty keen to do things on his own as well. But Tony, it's a pity I didn't sort out the photographs, because a lot of these guys are pictured in photographs operationally.
Oh, we still have plenty of time to do that communication behind the scenes to line it up, which is what John will sort of insist on anyway. But what I'd like really is for you to paint a picture of one of these externals. It can be any one of them. I'd like to go through, like, if helicopters were deployed, how many were they Alouettes, were the bigger ones, the American ones? What was the planning like? The orders, did you sit around sand models? How did you plan attacks and then go from the planning to the actual landing on the ground and then meeting the enemy after that? If you could give me an example.
Okay, well, speaking of helicopters, the first external deployment I did, our stick leader or operations leader was a guy who had been in the RLI. I think he was an SAS, or a guy called Dick Stent, Lieutenant Dick Stent. Anyway, so he jumps in the chopper. I jump in the chopper. This is an Alouette, of course. There's 4 of us in there, and there's the pilot and the gunner. And I start putting on my seatbelt in the chopper. And Stent looks at me and says, "Son, you ain't take that off. You ain't going to fall out of this thing." And from that day, I never used a seatbelt again. And he was right. I mean, this thing banks like that, you're not going to fall out. But remember, I'm 19 years old, and these are my first ops, if you like. But it was amazing. We did a variety of things. Always we would walk in, as I mentioned, we'd never be dropped on the X. We'd always walk at night. If we were doing an ambush, it would be normally 12 guys. You'd have a lookout 500 yards away with the radio, the A63, I think it was, the small means. You'd have another lookout on the other side of the road. You'd normally, let's give an example of mine laying. Okay, towards the end of the war, the South Africans came up with something called the Rose Mine, which was a mine about this size, but instead of having a single detonation point, it had 3 AP mines within this mine, and I had no idea how long it took to lay a mine. You firstly, you've got a blanket which has got a hole cut in it the same size as the mine. That's to sweep the sand away, and you actually kept the soil in different bags because you didn't want to put the old hardened soil on top, because that would stick out like a dog's. Well, it would stick out. Every time a car was coming, you had to fill in that hole, pick up all your stuff, and get back into the bush. You were constantly getting communications from the lookouts. Let's say we think there's something coming, or it stopped, or whatever. And this mine was unliftable. Okay, around the mine you had a K-light cover which had wires inside it that were electrically charged. So if anyone came with a minesweeper, it would go up. It even had an eye on it, which when you laid it, you covered it with a piece of felt, and then you carefully laid the soil over it. And if somebody came and swept that soil away and moved the felt, it would be detonated by moon or stars. So that was pretty, I'd say, pretty tense. You know, you're tired. You're doing it at night. You're having to go back in and out of the bush. But that was a job we did a couple of times. Another couple of times.
Did you have any successes on those?
I believe we did. I believe we did. We didn't stick around. This was on both occasions one of the main roads. I can't remember if it was just leading off the Great North Road or wherever it is. We did an operation near Kabanga Mission, which was, I believe it started off as an OP and then turned into a firefight. Most of my time was spent externals, or most of our time was spent on externals in Zambia. Night ambushes, jitter patrols, as I said, where you're operating close to the Zambezi, trying to either pick up the enemy or pick up their caches. An interesting thing was something I didn't know is one of the NCOs carried a piece of chalk with him, and we used to find we used to capture the terrorist weapons, including their Chinese-made or Russian-made landmines. And, you know, those mines have a well that you put the detonator in and you screw the cap on again. And when something goes over, it goes. So this NCO would take this piece of chalk, break it to a certain size, and put it back in the well, and then screw it down very carefully, and then screw it back. And what that was it reduced the distance of impact. So, you know, these guys would often come. The detonator had been left in the mine. They would know it was ready to go, so they'd screw it down a bit more, because you screw it down, you screw it back, and that piece of chalk made sure that the ignition would take place there and then. I don't know if it's something you'd come across.
No.
Another time we were holed up in Zambia, resting up during the day. I think there were maybe 8 of us. I've got some photos from that. It was actually a very good operation in terms of seeing wildlife. There were, I mean, the buffalo, the elephant, and I've sent you a picture of the elephant actually charging us. And there's another picture of the helicopter trying to take off while this elephant is there. But anyway, so the one day we're sitting up very clandestinely, and out of nowhere, one of the guys spots a group. Now, you're in 360 defense, all-round defense, as you know. So there's maybe only 3 or 4 of us facing where these
all right, carry on.
Where the terrorists are coming from. The other guys are all facing the opposite way, and it's very hard to remember if we initiated fire or they did. But next thing, all hell and fury is raining down on us. And, you know, we were under a couple of trees, and these things are just getting shot to pieces. They're using PKMs, they're using RPKs, even a couple of RPDs ignited where we were. So now, and everything happens, as you know, in a split second. I mean, contacts like this don't go on for hours. This is everything is happening immediately. The guys that are in the all-round defense are trying to get around to fire, but not shoot us in the back of the head. You know, there's a lot of moving pieces. So we returned fire. This maybe a couple of minutes. This carried on. They legged it. We tried to get to where they were. These guys had bombshells. There was some blood on the ground, but they just gapped it. So I wouldn't say that was a lemon, but it was a bit of a wake up for us. These guys were getting pretty keen to get into some fisticuffs.
And did you guys carry AKs, communist weapons, or were you with Rhodesian kit?
No, we did. Interesting to know that on our training and selection, we actually carried G3s.
Oh no.
Which I don't think anybody liked, but they did the job. The reason we carried them is so that the FNs that we had before wouldn't get busted up.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of that happening. So anyway, yeah, depending on the operation and depending on the firepower needed, we'd switch from FN MAG to AK and RPD. Let's say the MAG being your light machine gun, the equivalent to the RPD, let's say, and the PKM. So and we had some latitude as to which weapons we preferred. And you know, once you had a weapon of choice, you'd kind of stick to that individual weapon.
There's nothing nicer.
And I think
nothing nicer.
Sorry, Dave.
No, nothing nicer than the sound of the MAG, because it's got that throaty roar to it, hasn't it? It's really intimidating, far more so than an RPD.
You're so right, and the same with the FN and the AK.
Hmm.
The hitting power of the 7.62 NATO round is just immense. And you know, and this is not my own thoughts. This is thoughts that pretty much everybody knows. Is the AK is more a terrorist weapon where you can go into a building and shoot up a bunch of people. But no, we used both our weapons and the communist weapons, and yeah, we knew what we were doing because we've been trained on them during our pre-selection and coin phase. And then I think the next operation we went on was Op Miracle, aka Monte Cassino,